Well, this is a sermon I've been working on for about 6 months, so it feels like it's a little surreal to be actually here on the day of delivering it. But now some of you know that I like to work on things a little bit earlier in the week. Sometimes it's the morning of. This one's been percolating for a little bit longer. Now, as I mentioned at the notices this morning, that a couple of the readings are a little bit dicey, a bit spicy. I will talk about them, I promise you. And it is a wrestle. We wrestle with Scripture. We're meant to wrestle with it. It's not meant to just, sit there and, not be questioned or whatever. We can actually wrestle with it. And Hosea is not an easy book to read. It's not an easy one. It needs to be wrestled with. It needs to be contended with and asked questions about to God. Now, as rectors, we've got the power to change the readings. It's a minor power, but it is a power. You can change what you're going to read today. There is a lectionary that's set out for us, but you can actually move things around, and you can do a saint day today, or you can pick the alternate readings. But actually, I have left it in on purpose. There's 2 reasons for it. The first is I wanted to wear green today. I'll just be honest with you, I wanted to wear my green chasuble. I've also packed my other robe, so it's going to be a little bit tricky. So trying to do a white feast or a red feast is going to be difficult. But the actual more important reason I've left it in is that all Scripture has something to teach us. And all Scripture has something to teach us about the love of God for the human race. So I have left it in on purpose, and I will come to it, I promise you. But before we tie in the readings today, I want to talk to you about first love. First loves. Now, someone once told me that your first parish as a priest is a lot like a first love. And I have to agree with them, actually. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Carl. I don't think anybody in this congregation has heard this story before, but Carl's my first love, and it is a wholesome story, so don't worry too much where I'm going with this. But I will tell you, you're wondering who this Carl could be, and I promise you, Rusty and a few other people in the congregation today, it's not Carl Jung, just for once. And Leslie, it's not Carl Williams. He's that good? Yeah. Leslie and I like to watch Underbelly, so it's not either of those. As I said, it's a wholesome story. When I started high school, a couple of years ago now, I had to catch a school bus for the first time in my life, because before that I could just walk to primary school from where I lived. And Carl, the Carl I'm thinking about today, he was in year 11 when I was in year 7, and we caught the same bus. But he got off the bus, he lived in a different area to me, but he got off the bus a bit before I did. And he was on the bus when I got on it. So, that kind of works. And I thought he was so cool. He was the coolest guy ever. Now, he sat down the back of the bus, as you do when you're in year 11. And I had to sit at the front of the bus because, I was in year 7 and, that's how it works. And the teachers are nodding. They go, yes, that's exactly right. And as you get older, you get to move up to the back if you're lucky, if you're popular enough. And I sort of stayed at the middle, I think, my whole school career. Now, as I mentioned, Carl was on the bus before me in the mornings, but he used to get off the bus before I got to my stop. So I used to see him get off the bus. And he was a good-looking young guy. And I always, caught a little glimpse of him just as he got off the bus, down the stairs. And I could confidently say that Carl was a first love for me. Now, it was one-sided. I will point that out, okay? Carl and I never spoke. Not at all. I doubt he even knew I existed, and I think sometimes, when I was putting together the sermon, I was like, I wonder if he could only imagine that his name is being spoken in a church. He's very much living his life and doing his thing, But I do stop and wonder, what is he up to? What's he doing? Has he got a family? Is he still living in the same area? Has he moved on? They just flitter across my mind every now and then, and, I go about my day. Now, even though it was one-sided, because it very much was, it was still real, and it still shaped me. It is still something I think about even today. Not every day, that is certainly true. It's not an everyday thing. But it's here and there, and it's with fondness. It's with a smile. I think, oh yeah, that's right, I remember Carl. Now, he doesn't remember me, but I remember him. But also, it was interesting, also reflecting on first loves, is that my name has a mark of first love as well. Now, my middle name, which is shared with Margaret and maybe a few other people. Anyone got a middle name of Anne? There's a few. Wonderful. All right, well, I share it with all of you then who have the same middle name as Anne. When I was a kid, I asked my parents, said, who is that named after? Because there is no one named Anne in our family, not even in the extended family. And sometimes middle names are taken from family members and so on and so forth. And Mum said to me, it was the name of your father's first girlfriend. Now, Dad was a bit more calm and measured, and he calmly explained. My mother was a bit prone to hyperbole, but he said, Kimberly, when I was in kindergarten, Anne was a little girl in my class, and I used to walk to kindergarten with her, and she was my first friend. They're very different sort of things, aren't they? It's a much more wholesome story than what Mum had envisioned. And he made that my middle name because it was just someone who he remembered from his past who was kind to him and who they were friends with, like they were friends with each other. It was actually really, really wholesome, far more wholesome than the original story. Both of those stories of first love are pretty wholesome. We all have a first love. Now, you may be married to that person right now. You may have been married to them once and are no longer. Maybe they've died. And even if you're single and have been your whole life, you still have a first love. Somewhere in there is a first love. Maybe they caught the same bus to school with you, or maybe they walked to kindergarten with you. Whatever it is, we've all got one. We all have them. Because first love is a universal human experience. That's why I know you've all had one. Okay, I know that it's true. It's universal because God has a first love as well. And it's a spoiler alert to say that we are his first love. That people are God's first love. So it's fitting, we're made in the image of God, that we would have the same experience, that we would all have first loves. God's first love is us. Now, as I mentioned, a priest's first parish has all the hallmarks of first love. It's a bit less one-sided. The ones I've described are a little bit one-sided, but this one's a little bit, is certainly more reciprocal. Now, I have, and most of you know this, I have deep connections to St. Peter's, East Maitland. I came to faith there. I learnt about Anglicanism there. I felt a call to be a priest at St. Peter's, East Maitland. I became an Anglican at my confirmation, which was really interesting because it was by Bishop Peter in St. Peter's, East Maitland, and my father's name was Peter, and it was just this triumvirate of Peters. It was really lovely. My parents' funerals were at that church, and their interment of their ashes are there. And one day it'll probably be the place where I have my own funeral. There's lots of connections to St. Peter's, East Maitland. It's one of those places that will hold my heart. But the first parish that you lead as a priest has an indelible mark, or leaves an indelible mark, on a priest's psyche and their soul, which are actually the same thing. Your psyche and your soul are the same thing. It is an imprint that is left on the priest. I suppose in many ways this has been a bit hyper true for me as I left another profession to follow God's call. And Dungog was the place he appointed for this new life to begin. And you may not be aware, or maybe you are, some people are, some people aren't, that this parish was where I completed most of the big priest milestones. There's a couple of priests in our congregation today, and they know what I mean. There's a few priest milestones that priests go through. Dennis and Donna, number 1 for weddings forever. You'll always be number 1. That was the first wedding I ever did by myself. I always accompanied other priests to see how it was done and all that kind of stuff. But Dennis and Donna's was the very first one I ever did all by myself. And I remember telling you guys about all the dreams I used to have about getting it wrong. And then I would wake up and they're not legally married. And I have to tell them this. Oh, so many. It was tough, man. But we got there, and you are legally married. It's wonderful. And you're also sacramentally married, so everyone's a winner. organising the confirmations of Leslie, Dennis, Donna, Frankie and Curly. All of you are here today. And 5 adult confirmations in a parish where the confirmees still attend is unheard of in Anglican circles. It is unheard of. That is a real miracle. It's one of God's great gifts to this parish and to me. First, baptisms. I'd never done a baptism before I came to Dungog. And my friend Liz, who had a couple of babies by then, I asked her if I could practice holding her babies because I don't have babies and I didn't know how to. And she was so funny. I said, and I was holding her baby and she said, just dip it, Kim, just dip your arm. It'll be fine. Bless her. So I knew that I could actually decline the child and it wouldn't break them. First funerals, first last rites, first graveside burials, first Easter, first Christmas, SRE assemblies, first parish council meetings, first R3 rollout, first new cemetery legislation, first property boundary knowledge, first clerical ministry ordinance knowledge. Oh, that's less exciting. But it was all in there, and it was all part of the tapestry of skills that priests need to develop. And that is the grace that you have given me, is the ability to be able to develop those skills. And I will forever be grateful for that gift because you can't do it without learning it, and I appreciate it so much. Now, I promised that I would work through our spicy reading in Hosea today, and actually I thought to myself, yeah, it is a bit spicy when you sort of look at it at the surface level, but actually it's easy to work with if you look through the lens of love, like most things are. Just talk about love, Kim, that'll be okay. And it's true. We've talked a lot about symbolism in the scriptures and how God, through the prophets, sometimes asks them to do some seemingly bizarre things to highlight the sometimes broken heart of God. And Hosea is no different. These are one of these symbolic acts that Hosea is called to do. Now, remember, this passage was composed at a time when Israel was divided. We talked about that last week if you were here. Remember, we had, just to confuse you, had Israel to the north, Judah to the south, and they were split, they were divided, and they were all thinking about and talking about everything else that was not God. That's what was going on. And Hosea is called to speak to the north, so he's up talking to Israel. And how God must have looked upon his first loves, his people that he created, watching them forget him and chasing after other gods, which we still totally do now. I am one of them as well. We all do it. It's probably not a golden calf. It was in Hosea's time, but it could also be and was in his time and in our time. Misuse of power, seeking and needing approval, apathy. These are all things that separate our hearts from God. And Hosea was talking to very similar people. We're all inclined to do this kind of thing. And it's just the showing of God's brokenheartedness because he loves them so much. He loves us so much that when we, stray off the path, it just breaks his heart. Now, as we learned last week, division is one of the things that can really separate us from God when we're divided amongst ourselves. That's what happened to Israel. That's how they became so divided. And yet, in our reading today, if you go to the end of that Hosea reading, after all the spice, God's love always circles back to belonging and connection, doesn't he? Because he says, you are not my people, becomes, you are my children. You will say, we are the children of God. That's the final word for Israel and for us. We are God's children. Friends, I never spoke to Carl, as you know, and yet he stayed with me. Not because of what we shared, but because of what I felt. Now, many of you have, in the last couple of weeks, given me photographs of you, of our church buildings, of our town, and I think this is you asking me not to forget you. But that's the thing about first loves. You never forget them. Even when they're a little bit one-sided, like the one I described, you actually never forget them. You never forget first love. First loves teach us, like most all experiences in life teach us, but first love teaches us. It teaches us about love, but also sometimes, like Carl and I, they teach us to love and to let go, which is always the trickier one. but they teach us to love and to let go. And this parish, my first parish, will always be my first parish, has taught me too. It's taught me to love and to let you go where God is taking you as the people of God in this next stage of your journey. Friends, if I've left a legacy for you, as I mentioned in my writing on the pew sheet, I do pray that it is a legacy that points to Jesus Christ, the head of the church, the one on whom we love and trust beyond all else, and of course the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. If I have fallen short, I pray that you will forgive me, as Jesus teaches us in the Lord's Prayer today. If I can teach you anything, I pray that it is paradox that is something that can be lived in. You all knew I was going to say it. Paradox is something that can be lived in, held, learned from, and that you are free to be who you are in Jesus Christ, to be authentically you. Life isn't always black and white. I hope I've taught you that as well, that life isn't always black and white, that your feelings are trustworthy and they are reliable. And finally, that all scripture is about Jesus Christ. The Old Testament and the New Testament, it's all pointing to Jesus Christ. I'm very thankful to God for calling me out of my very comfortable life to show me what living really is. You'll probably never know just what you've taught me, but God really is all about new life, and he calls us to that as disciples of Jesus. Friends, keep inviting people to church. Keep inviting people to know the good news of Jesus Christ, because you have so much to offer. This faith has so much, this church has so much to offer. The Anglican Church has so much to offer. And once we become confident in offering it, that's what we need to develop that skill and continue developing that skill, because we have so much to offer as a church. You have so much to offer as the people of God and the story of Jesus Christ, because it's a true story. Jesus really did rise bodily from the dead. You can be sure of this, because when you invite others to church, be sure of that. You can be sure that this really did happen. And as you invite people to church and in that surety, you become more confident. I urge you to keep going with that. As for me, I find myself a bit like Jonah, actually, in the whale, travelling toward my destiny in the belly of a paradox. It's really living between two cities at the moment, actually, in two places. And as I said, if I can teach you one thing, it is to live in that space and to hold it gently and not collapse the tension. Just let it be as it is. We don't know what the future holds, but we do know this, that God is steering the ship and we are simply called to be faithful. Thank you.